Hey up, how's it going? Right, we're back again and I'm trying something a little bit different. It's going to be the same sort of thing as the last video, white background and black paint, but I've done the marking out a little bit heavier than I did on the last one. As you know, these videos, I don't expect anybody really to watch them, so I'm just trying out different things to see how they look on camera. Okay, we'll get painting. Trying out with the same again, same brushes as in the last painting. So far I have now a number 4 from AS Handovers in London in the UK. So we'll be using that one and a number 8. So we'll get cracking straight away with this one. I don't know, and I won't know until I get to editing whether this is something you can see and you can make out who this person is. And my next video is also going to be another portrait, and then I might have got showing you a bit of same sort of style in a bit of wildlife, something like that. So and at the moment, like I say, I'm in a 10-foot by 8-foot summer house that is not insulated and not fully sealed yet, so we get quite a few creepy crawlies coming in. So hopefully none of them will join us on the painting. I did notice on the last video one walking across the wall, so I don't know if anybody else noticed that. If you did, put it in the comments and tell me what time it came across. That'd be fun. Oh, not done any painting at all yet today. This is the first, and I do usually these days like a bit of a, I suppose you could call it a bit of a warm-up with the way my hands work these days. But we'll just go for it. Let's get down there. Another thing that I won't mind asking everybody is about music, background music, things like that. I'm not a fan of background music on these sort of videos, so that's my personal preference, and that's why I haven't put any on. But I don't know what you lot think, because I find it a bit distracting when you're trying to listen to somebody talk about what they're doing. But just because that's my opinion, it doesn't mean to say it's yours. So let me know. And I did hear some of the outside noise on the last video as well. So I definitely heard the aeroplane, and I heard a couple of trains go by, very quiet in the background. And I also heard some of the local wildlife, something like sounded like a wood pigeon or something like that. So let me know if you heard that and if that was distracting. I'm trying something slightly different with the microphones, but they're only cheap ones, so there's not an awful lot I can do about it. But I'm trying something slightly different today just to test that out as well. And for those of you patiently waiting, I will be definitely getting some lettering videos on. Obviously, it's my bread and butter, but I want to get more proficient at making these videos, so I decided just to do some of these fun things just to get going, because like I said in the last one, I don't expect many people to be watching these videos. If you do, I hope you enjoy them, and please feel free to comment and let me know if you are enjoying them and what you'd like to see me do. I've got some interesting stuff coming up that I've already got planned, but like I say, I just want to get better and I want to produce the best videos that I can. This one should be a shorter video than the one that we did last time of Freddie Mercury. So this is, I'll give you a clue with it because I don't know whether you can see it. You probably can this one, so you might make out who it is before I even get to the end, because like I say, I've done marking out a bit heavier on this one. So it's all trial and error for me, just so that I can see what you can see on screen. And looking at the last video so far, most people were watching on TV, which is very interesting. That's how I tend to watch YouTube these days. And I saw lots of things. I was quite pleased with how it turned out, considering it was my first video. So I'm not particularly good at this yet, and by doing these sorts of videos, I'm going to get myself more experience. We'll just pull that line down a little bit and just keep that a little bit wet until we get back with a big brush. And it's quite windy out there today. So it's Thursday here in the UK, and so it was a couple of days since I recorded my last video. It's still fairly warm, it's just a bit windy today, so it's another good test. Obviously, once I do get the insulation done in here, that'll cut down somewhat the outside noise. Which I didn't think was too bad, to be fair. I mean, if I was watching that video as a viewer, then the actual external noises wouldn't have bothered me too much. As long as I can hear what the person's saying and then see what they're doing, I'm quite happy. And I tend to prefer watching more natural videos, not some things that are not overproduced. If I want to watch something that's overproduced, I'll put Netflix on and watch something on there. But I tend to like YouTube to be more real. Right, we'll grab another brush. So, and then we're back on, as in the last video, a AS Handover 2112 number 8 long-haired chisel. So I'm trying to remember to tell you things that I'm doing as I'm going along, and remembering to tell you what I'm using. Again, today I'm using One Shot black enamel. I do tend to forgot to mention a lot of things in the last video, and I'll probably do so the same in this one. So I'll get used to it and get into the flow of things. So for somebody like me, unless you're used to doing it and you're experiencing doing this sort of thing, everything's sort of like quite natural. So there's a lot of things I don't think about that I just believe are just perfectly normal things that you're probably very interested in knowing why I'm doing it and what I'm doing. So ask away, feel free. ask in the comments, and that'll help me in future videos to realise what things I need to say. And of course, it's also a very good engagement for me. And that famous YouTube algorithm will pick those things up, and it'll help me enormously reach more people. Well, more importantly, it'll help me give information to people who are trying to learn about this. So feel free to let me know. Well, it's windy today, so I've got the door closed, and one of the dogs has just tried to push the way in. Cleared off now. I've got 2 poodles, which is quite funny. I've got a toy poodle who's blind. He gets around really well. He's very amusing. What a character he is. And he's 12, but he's an old 12 because, as you could probably imagine, for life for a blind dog it's a lot of hard work. So he's very tired 12 now, but he's still quite fun. And so that's Tiny. He was a rescue dog. He came from a farm in Wales. A sad story. He was only 2 when he came to us, and it was a sad story behind that. And he wasn't blind when he came to us. He developed that as he got older, when he was probably about 5 or 6. Well, he's so entertaining. And I've got the other poodle. She's not a full poodle. She's a cross between a Bichon and a miniature poodle. So she's quite a bit bigger than him. And she has a completely different character. She's very, very quiet and very lazy. Loves a walk, but if she's not out for a walk, she likes nothing better than to sleep. There we go. Oops, must remember not to. I think I knocked the tripod then, so. I can probably tell who that is already. I'm sure this one's doing. I've simplified it quite a lot from my original drawing, just so that we can get through this without doing the dreaded time lapse. So I'm now, as I mentioned, I'm in the north of England, in Lancashire. But I'm not from here. I am from the north, but I'm not from here. So I met my wife, who has lived her whole life in the village, and I moved over here to be with her. I'm from East Yorkshire, so Yorkshireman in Lancashire. So as I say, I've only got about another 140 years to go, and I might get accepted then. But it's lovely over here, really like it. these small pieces in with this brush, and then we'll be pulling down the big piece. Yeah, I've heard a couple of trains go by today. It's as I said in the last video, I don't live on top of the railway. Well, obviously I don't. That won't be very good, would it? But it's a few hundred metres away from where we live, and it is a main line. And some people have said to us, how can you live so close to a railway line? Doesn't it annoy you? And to be honest, you don't hear it. I suppose there'll be those of you that have other types of things that you live close to, and after a while, you don't even hear it anymore. I'm a bit overreaching on this, really, but it's okay. It's not too difficult, so. Get that pulled down. I mean, when you're painting as much as you can, yeah. I've got to go back now. I've got a bit heavy there on that, so as much as you can, you want to finish up and down. Stops it sagging if you've got a little bit too much on. I'm hearing some noises outside, people chatting, going by. I'm hoping they're the sort of things that I don't want to be picking up on the microphone, but they are. I'm not going to be getting a soundproof studio anytime soon, so I'll have to live with that. Right, so generally with these, when I've finished them, I varnish them so any little dry spots will be taken away and become almost invisible once the varnish goes on. I'd like to know if you'd like to see the actual process before I start painting. I mean, I suppose I could do, it'd be very long to do a video of everything all in one go, so I thought, well, if people are interested, I'll do like 2-part videos, not all the time, just occasional ones on that, just so people get to see the process. But I could do part 1 like all the sketching and preparation, and then part 2 like this, just the finishing off, the fun bit. But let me know in the comments. So great things to do for you to when you're starting off these sort of things, get used to the feel of the paint on the board and learning a bit of brush control before in between when you start learning with lettering, it's twisting and pulling of the brush to get the different things. But at least doing this isn't really going to give you that sort of thing. What it's going to do is going to help you understand how it feels, and you're going to understand what feels good with the consistency of the paint. So, a bit more detail in here. This is going to completely give it away, because this very talented young lady, who is no longer with us, sadly, she had quite pronounced features. When I was a kid, I say a kid, a teenager, I mentioned it in another video that I used to play the drums, and in that time I used to, when I was an apprentice, and of course you didn't make a lot of money in them days as well. There was no minimum wage. I mean, you were glad of it. You were glad to be learning the trade. And I used to work when I could with a PA hire company, PA system, and we used to go around, and groups or artists or performers would hire this PA system, and I'd go along as part of the road crew, setting it all up, doing a bit of engineering. I wasn't the sound engineer, but I used to help with that. I was one of the bodies lugging it about. If it was a band, then because I played the drums, I used to do these bands weren't huge bands. They were decent bands, decent level bands, but they wouldn't have had a drum tech or anything like that to do sound checks and things. So I used to do the sound checks, and I was only about 16 at the time, so I'm surprised I can remember. But most of the people that I came across in those days were really nice. Even they were mostly heavy metal, heavy rock bands back in the very early 1980s. And it was good fun. And we actually did, because I'm from Hull originally, or Hull. I always forget our H is in Hull. And we used to do quite a bit at the university in Hull. And we did Paul Young, and he was probably the most famous person at the time that we did the sound for. And what an absolute gent he was. He was wonderful. It's usually I found that the more famous and they were, the nice people they were. It was those who were trying to be famous that thought they were bigger than they are. They were generally the ones that were a bit rude. And me being a bit wet behind the ears, I was 16 years old, I didn't know how to deal with them. I do remember one. The band did have some moderate success, this band, and their drummer was a complete and absolute, well, I'm not going to swear on these videos because my grandchildren will want to watch them. So, but you get what I'm going to say. He was a complete moron. And because I was some 16-year-old kid, I thought he was quite old, but he was probably only about 22, 23. So that's a big age difference when you're 16. And he treated me like a rubbing rag. And I wasn't having a very pleasant time. Well, Neil, who was a sound engineer that day, obviously noticed this was going on. It was quite funny. And I was so wet behind the ears, it took me a while to pick up what he was doing. So, Neil, when you're doing sound engineering, I was doing the drums, and I had these earphones on, so he could talk to me in the earphones without anybody else hearing him. So the only person that would hear him would be me. So I was going through the sound check, doing all these drums and everything, and the actual drummer, he could have done it himself because he was actually there. And he was stood in the middle of what was like a dance floor where the audience would be later on, chatting up these young ladies, being the big rock star. Of course he wasn't. I mean, they did make some records, this band, and they had some moderate success, but never a household name, even for people who were into that type of music. They were never a household name. And he just thought he'd show off in front of those young ladies and try and embarrass me and show off being the big I am. And Neil noticed all this going on and him bossing me around. So he got me to do all this stuff. And I mean, these days I can't even play because of certain things, but at 16 I'd been playing since I was about 5 years old. So I was reasonably competent. I didn't know this at the time, you're a kid, you don't know. You don't know how good you are or how bad you are. You just play and it's fun, and that's all I did it for. But Neil knew, and Neil knew how competent this other drummer was. And once I'd finished the sound check, he got me to play. I said, "Well, we don't normally do that." And he says, "No, just do a bit of a drum solo." He says, "Just do what you do." So I didn't think anything of it. I started doing this thing well, and I sort of looked over to this drummer, and he was bright red and boiling, and he stormed out in a huff. And I still didn't realise what was going on, and I knew he was angry. I thought he was just angry at me for playing his drums, and he said he didn't say I could. He was angry because he realised that he was being a bully to a 16-year-old kid that was better than he was. So that's quite funny to look back on. But in general, say most of the people that we met doing that sort of thing were wonderful, lovely. I remember the comedian Alexis Sale did him once. He was a really nice guy. His management was a bit of an idiot, but the guy himself was a lovely guy. So I played in quite a few heavy metal bands in the 80s and achieved absolutely zero success. Which is fine by me because it was always a hobby. See, what I was interested in was this. Drumming was a hobby that I enjoyed doing. Soundwriting is an absolute passion. And even at 16, like I say, I was a reasonably competent drummer at the time for my age, and if I'd have put a lot more into it, I would have been a lot better than I was, I suppose. But it wasn't my passion. It was something I enjoyed doing. And I was in a band that got offered a record contract and went on a tour of Scandinavia. But of course, once that was offered, I left. I weren't going on a tour. I wasn't living out of a suitcase. I knew that much about myself at 16. I wasn't prepared to give up the apprenticeship of being a songwriter. And if you ever get into doing this, or if you are a songwriter, you'll be able to put it in the comments. When it gets you, it really does get you. 42, 43 years later, I still love it. And consider myself very, very fortunate that most of my adult life I've got up every morning and gone to work to do something I absolutely love to do. And that's worth to me more than any amount of money. And that was my dad, God rest his soul, when I was leaving school. And I'll never forget his words. My dad wasn't we lived on a council estate in Hull. He wasn't successful financially, but he was definitely successful as a father. And he said to me, he says, when I was coming to leave school, he says, what I want you to do, he says, I want you to pick a job that you know you're going to love doing. He says, don't think about the money. He says, the money doesn't mean anything if you go to work every day doing something you hate. He says, pick something you're going to love because you're going to be doing it for a very, very long time. And he was right. So, good advice from my dad. And a good artist he was as well, was my dad. And he didn't do it enough. He was too busy working hard for all us. I've got two brothers and a sister, and I'm the youngest. And he worked hard. Didn't leave him a lot of time back in those days, and wasn't a lot of money around. Didn't leave him a lot of time to take care of his own hobbies. But when he could, he used to paint. He used to get bits of hardboard, actually. And he'd have bits of paint, and he used to like painting like small boats on the sea and things like that. And they were very good. So I suppose that's where I get it from. And he used to tell some stories, maybe one or two of them, in videos in the future, I might relay. So quite amusing things from the end of the Second World War, because he was quite young at the end of the Second World War, but he was involved in it. So he got some stories. But as we're nearly finished, we'll not go into those today, but maybe another time. So this has been quite easy and quite nice to do. It really is good fun doing this. And when I say easy, I don't mean to be flippant. So there might be some of you watching that saying, I could never do that. And he's saying it's easy. I'm saying it's easy. What I really mean is easier if you're when you're at the very early stages of learning this, it's easier to do something like this as a practice than to doing something like those sort of things. So although, to some people, this looks like more fun than that is really hard compared to this. So that's all I mean by that. I don't mean to be flippant or I'm not boasting. I've been doing this 42, 43 years now. So I should be reasonably competent by now. So if you have any questions and you need to know something, put it in the comments, and obviously if I know the answer, I'll reply to it. I'm going to be one of those. I'm going to try and reply to every single comment, as long as it's not one of those comments I'm going to delete. There we go. The lovely Amy Winehouse. Well, I bet many of you would have guessed that way before I finished on that one. But I simplified this. It was a lot more complicated before I started doing this one. And I decided that this one blended itself really well to simplifying it down quite a lot, because there was quite a lot of detail in the hair, as you can imagine. And I thought I'll just simplify that down because it doesn't really need it to get it across on the video. So once again, hope you enjoyed that. I hope you'll come and see me again, and see you later.